There's only 4 words. This one's for John.
This one's for Pat.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a 4th of July episode. It is going to be a special occasion type theme here. As you can see from the title, we are stretching. We are trying as absolute hard as we can to come up with something. The creative part of me today was not really there. I did get a Starbucks coffee to try to help with the creativity process, and this is what I came up with. Okay. Fireworks. Okay. Fireworks are a big part of the 4th of July, and we're also going to go through and talk about which coaches, including 4 first-time head coaches, which ones will work and which ones will be fired, rather which ones will be fired and which ones will work. That was something that I wanted to dive into. We also are going to be looking at some of the top players to ever play for the NFL that also happen to serve in uniform. We're going to be looking at NFL, each AFC and NFC, every team's MVP. So for some of the teams, they're going to be a little more obvious, like maybe the Ravens and the Bills and the Chiefs. But on the other hand, there's plenty of other teams where it's debatable. And then we're going to be looking at some of the best players at every position ahead of the 2024 NFL season. We're going to look at the top defensive line rankings, and we'll see which teams make the top 5, even though we're going to rank all 32, and we're going to be looking at an article that was posted on PFF. And we're going to be looking at the best units in the NFL, which team has the best offensive line, receiving corps, and secondary. So we're going to kind of look at all these different things, but I wanted to start with ranking the head coaches and talking about which head coaches are going to be fired, which head coaches are going to work. Now, I started off this list by ranking them, and it gets hard to rank 32. I mean, you go, is it Jim Harbaugh above John Harbaugh? Where does Matt LaFleur rank? What about Sean Payton after last year with Denver? Does he drop down the list, or is he safe? So the best way I could do this was to put tiers together, okay? So the tier 1, I don't think there's going to be any arguments to be had here. Number 1, it's got to be Andy Reid, okay? Andy Reid's won his 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years, trying to win or become the first ever to win 3 in a row this year. His 258 regular season wins are 4th most in league history, and his 26 playoff victories rank 2nd. Reid is the only head coach in NFL history to post 100 wins with 2 franchises. He helped develop Donovan McNabb and turn the Philadelphia Eagles into a regular contender before he headed to Kansas City to work with Patrick Mahomes. And keep in mind, before he was in Kansas City working with Patrick Mahomes, he was in Kansas City working with Alex Smith. And he was also having success prior to Mahomes showing up too. I mean, few head coaches have Reid's type of experience, Reid's type of success. And as much as people want to say, was it Mahomes or, like the Brady Belichick, is it Andy Reid or is it Mahomes? Look, we saw the Chiefs plenty last season having meltdowns. And look, there were times where even in the Super Bowl where Travis Kelce was screaming at Andy Reid, were you questioning the leadership and the authoritative role that Andy Reid plays. You question that stuff, but you know what? At the end of the day, when you win Super Bowl after Super Bowl, people are going to ignore all of that. And frankly, unfortunately for Broncos country, that's where the Chiefs are at right now. So I think with Bill Belichick being gone, and you could even make an argument that if Bill Belichick was still in the NFL, that the best head coach in the NFL right now is Andy Reid. Okay. Number 2, and you might hate me for this one, but Sean McVay. Sean McVay to the Los Angeles Rams. Since becoming the NFL's all-time youngest head coach in 2017, McVay has led LA to double-digit wins and a playoff appearance in 5 of his 7 seasons. Andy's already won a Super Bowl with the Matthew Stafford first year and getting Von Miller and all that going against the Bengals in that Super Bowl. There were rumors surrounding Sean McVay and interest in broadcasting and if he was going to walk away from head coaching, and all of those talks have totally died down. He even made a comment this year that he feels like a spring chicken with all this youthful energy around him. The Rams are headed in a great direction, and Sean McVay is going to have this team being a legitimate Super Bowl contender this year because that's all Sean McVay does is win. I mean, he's got a regular season record of 70-44. So 0.609, and the guy can flat out coach. And so can the guy that I put right underneath him at number 3, Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan has a record of 64-51. He's fallen just short of grabbing a Lombardi trophy a couple times now. We were just talking about he would be the only coach in NFL history to go to the Super Bowl as many times as he has and ultimately end up winning one. All the other guys' history is not on Kyle Shanahan's side. It is not. Shanahan remains one of the NFL's best play callers, and he helped turn Mr. Irrelevant into an MVP candidate. Everybody knows Kyle Shanahan's the real deal. Now, why he can't get over the hump, we could go back and forth on that. Is it his coaching? Is he getting too conservative? Is the team not preparing? I mean, you heard that there were players on the 49ers that didn't even have a plan for overtime. And there was even some players that didn't know the rules to overtime. It's not an experience. The one thing I will say, though, is that the 49ers defensively were not their normal selves last year. And unfortunately, if they would have been, I think they could have won that Super Bowl. But things went the other direction. And now the 49ers making a change at defensive coordinator. I expect the 49ers to put together another Super Bowl push. I'll put it that way. At number 4, all right, and I'm going to fly through these now because we're getting almost outside the top 5. John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. Okay, I think Mike Tomlin's got to crack your top 5 since he's taken over Pittsburgh since 2007. Mike Tomlin has taken the Steelers to the playoffs 11 times. That's a large amount, and he's won 7 AFC North titles, and he's brought home just 1 Lombardi trophy, but he's gone to a couple Super Bowls. He infamously never posted a losing season despite subpar quarterback play. Tomlin's an excellent leader of men and an icon in the city. He's got to be on your top 5, and right above him, John Harbaugh, the Baltimore Ravens. This guy's got a record of 160-99. After winning Super Bowl 47 with Joe Flacco, Harbaugh led a transition to Lamar Jackson, helping turn the former first-rounder into a 2-time MVP. He's always willing to make aggressive in-game maneuvers because of his accomplishments. They've earned him the total support from ownership. And you're talking about not just a guy that coaches well, that leads well, a great locker room culture, but also a guy that drafts really well. I mean, John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens have been running a really great program, and it all kind of starts with John Harbaugh over there. We got Bill in the chat. What's up, Bill? Happy to have you in here. Happy 4th. I am battling like a little, just feeling a little under the weather. Like my chest almost feels like I was around somebody with bronchitis or something. So bear with me. All right. Now I'm going to go through these a little bit faster. Jim Harbaugh just misses the top 5, comes in at number 6. He didn't collect a Super Bowl during his time as the 49ers head coach, but he could have. He almost did. He went to one. He just came off a national championship with Michigan. He is the real deal, as he has a regular season record of 44-19-1. That's 0.69 win percentage. Pretty remarkable stuff there. Okay. At number 7, you got Matt LaFleur with the Green Bay Packers, who's 56-27. Some people were thinking, oh, is it Matt LaFleur or is it Aaron Rodgers? Like, Matt LaFleur eradicated any suggestions that his success was due to Aaron Rodgers based on how he coached up Jordan Love last season. I mean, this guy guided the NFL's youngest roster to 9 wins in 2023 and nearly took the 49ers down in the divisional round. And by the end of the season, Jordan Love looked like a full-blown superstar. Everything in Green Bay is pointing up. You got to love your head coach and your team and your quarterback if you're a Packers fan. Okay. Okay. Now rounding out the top 10, I got Sean Payton. Okay. I know that some people might think this is a little high for Sean Payton. I still think that he's one of the great coaches in the league's game, and I think he can actually work his way up this list from here. I think this is more of a floor for Sean Payton. He led the Russell Wilson-led Broncos to 8 wins. The Broncos flirted with the playoffs and ultimately didn't make it, but Denver and Sean Payton did get more out of Russell Wilson under Sean Payton's watch. And I think this year, with Bo Nix and the direction that the franchise is headed, I think Sean Payton could re-cement himself as one of the top play callers in the league. And then coming in at 9, you got Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. Now, Dan Campbell at this point, it has more than lived up to the hype in 2023 because there was a lot of hype. And then last season, the hype was real. Okay. The Lions finished 12-5. They win their first playoff game in over 30 years. Campbell has rebuilt Detroit's entire roster, turning one of the league's former laughing stocks into a well-respected, well-run franchise. You can only make a turnaround like that with the top 10 head coach. And then I'll do number 10. This is number 10, Mike McDaniel. Okay. Now, I think Mike McDaniel is responsible for a lot of the success we're seeing out of Tua Tagovailoa. The Dolphins are a legitimate top 5 offense every single year. Mike McDaniel has been the coach. Miami hasn't been able to get over the hump in the playoffs, but McDaniel already has 2 postseason appearances. And last year, not the one that just happened, the one before that, he didn't even have his star quarterback in that game. So that's the same number of times the Dolphins went to the playoffs in the previous 20 years before Mike McDaniel took charge. So keep in mind, Dolphin fans, when you're watching the press conference after losing to the Chiefs in the playoffs and you're saying, fire him, because all of a sudden your prejudgments of you know what you don't like about him, all of a sudden when you lose, all of a sudden the way he dresses really pisses you off. When you lose, all of a sudden his quirky comments to the media all of a sudden is not so funny. You know, and these are just things that I was seeing from the fan base after that loss. Why does he dress like that? Why does he do? Keep in mind, you guys have tasted more success in the 2 years that Mike McDaniel has been at the helm than you have in the previous 20 years. It just goes to show that as the circumstances get better, so does the expectations. And for Mike McDaniel, the expectations, because of the success he's had, is eventually to get over the hump in the playoffs. But even with that, I can't say that this guy's not a top 10 coach in the NFL. Okay. And then I'm going to go through some of these pretty fast now that we're at 11. Kevin Stefanski, Zach Taylor, DeMeco Ryans, already 13th on the list. Okay. Sean McDermott, 14. Sean McDermott. Doug Peterson, 15. Nick Sirianni, 16. Kevin O'Connell, 17. Okay. Mike McCarthy, 18. And discussing Mike McCarthy always seems to generate more questions than answers, especially people trying to figure out is this guy really, really freaking good, or does this guy suck? I mean, you talk about a hot and cold opinion, but you do look at the type of offense that he's been guiding. And last year, losing Kellen Moore, taking over play calling duties. Mike McCarthy is definitely one of the top play callers in the league. His offense says otherwise if you disagree. 19, Shane Steichen. Number 20, Dan Quinn, the Washington Commanders, who has a record of 43 and 42. Okay, Dan Quinn, this is going to be an interesting move, and we'll wait and see, okay? Number 21, Todd Bowles. Number 22, Brian Daboll, the winner of the 2022 Coach of the Year award. He went through it last year. We know that. Daniel Jones missed several games with a concussion before having the season-ending ACL, and the Giants were eventually forced to roll with Tommy Tuggs under center. But Daboll's sideline blowups became a talking point, and his turbulent relationship with defensive coordinator Wink Martindale eventually led to the latter's resignation. Brian Daboll has a lot to prove this year. And it's not just coming from, Brian Daboll. It's not just coming from the media. This is the way that the general manager is talking, not about Brian Daboll, but the state of the Giants and how they are at a fork in the road. And his comments about Daniel Jones was like, look, you still have that opportunity. Joe, this is what general manager Joe said today. He said, this is the year for Daniel Jones to show if he's the Giants guy for the next decade. Okay. So there's still an opportunity out there. You're paying Daniel Jones $40 million a year. It's not to hand the ball off to a $12 million back. You're paying a guy $40 million a year to go out there and be the franchise quarterback. Okay. The decision to not place the franchise tag on Barkley with $12 million per year was a pretty easy one, according to the general manager. And when the Giants director of player personnel, Tim McDonald, asked rhetorically what the team's identity will be on offense if it lost Saquon, Scone, the general manager, I can never pronounce his last name, he made it clear that the Giants felt that they had too many other issues to overspend on Barkley at a lower priority position. And this is what he said. My plan is to address the offensive line at some point here in free agency. We're sitting at number 6. There's a chance at an offensive weapon there, which they got. This is the year for Daniel. Plan all along was to give him a couple of years. He's our guy for the next 10 years. Is he our guy for the next 10 years, or do we need to pivot and find somebody else? And that's the reality of the situation the Giants are facing this season. Jones is coming off a neck injury and a torn ACL, entering a critical year 6 with the franchise. The addition of Malik Neighbors could help immensely, but the offensive line must improve immensely from last year's performance, or Daniel Jones might not even get a shot to show anything. The reality is that Jones has had 3 serious injuries in 2 years. We need to protect ourselves. He didn't have much of a chance this year. That's legit. Like your offseason, your core guys that you are going to that you're going to play together, play less than 60 snaps together. We got effed. 3 practice squad guys playing for us. So just general manager going on about how banged up the Giants have been. And he goes, you could have Patrick Mahomes and he can't effing win behind that. I'm not giving up on Jones. He's under contract for 3 more years, just protecting ourselves because the best predictor of the future is the past. So this is what pronounce it like Shane. Okay. Shane. Oh, wow. I would have never gotten that. So this is what I get out of all of that. Okay. His whole comment about the best predictor of the future is the past is not necessarily a bad thing for Daniel Jones. It's almost like when people say it is what it is, right? It is what it is can be a good thing if it is. It can be a bad thing if it is. And in some cases, we don't know what it is. We know what it was. We know what it could be, but we've also seen what it has been. Daniel Jones has an opportunity right in front of him to take this job back, to remind people that when he beat the Vikings in that playoff game by having an amazing game and by making great decisions, running with the football, I mean, that was the peak moment for Daniel Jones in his career. Now, with the injuries and the offensive line and the addition of Malik Neighbors, he has an opportunity right in front of him. And if the Giants didn't feel that way about him, they would have drafted a quarterback. And instead, they double down and they say, look, I don't think our eyes lied to us the year before. There's a reason that we gave him $40 million a year. Okay? Now, we could see a player that falls apart like Russell Wilson did year 11, year 12. But you're telling me that a guy in his 6th year that showed some really good promise in year 4, you're telling me that was a fluke? You're telling me that what I'm seeing didn't happen? So I think for Daniel Jones, you got to love this opportunity that you're in to go out there on a better roster with a better team, with a better offensive line and better weapons, to go out there and prove to everybody that you're for real. And with that said, Brian Daboll is in the same situation, right? If the Giants don't have a good season, if they win 3 games or 4 games, both Daniel Jones and Daboll will be gone next year. Okay? So I'm going to say for fired or works, unfortunately, I'm going to go with fired here. This is the first spot on my list that we get to a fired head coach. Okay? Brian Daboll has a 15-18-1 record. He won Coach of the Year in 2022, but it feels like a long time ago. When you get a better roster on paper, the expectation is that the results will follow. I don't know if the Giants are going to win more games than they lose. And I think if you're predicting that, then predicting the firing and the quarterback being gone is not such a bold prediction. So it's unfortunate, but I think Brian Daboll is the first coach that may not be safe just 2 years after being Coach of the Year. And that just is a testament to how the business side of football is dirty and is relentless. And if you don't win, nothing else matters. What have you done for me lately? And look, Brian Daboll is going to want to be best friends with Daniel Jones because their success is reliant on each other this year. At number 23, Raheem Morris. Okay, and I'm going to tell you right now, fired. Raheem Morris is, I don't think, going to work out for the Atlanta Falcons. The one thing the Falcons have going for them is that Kirk Cousins is their quarterback right now. But this is not the first time we've seen Raheem Morris as a head coach. Okay, He dealt with depleted rosters as the Buccaneers' 33-year-old head coach more than a decade ago. We shouldn't judge him too hard on the win-loss record, but he was 21-38. In an offensive happy league where everything is trending towards the offense of the ball, you look at the top 5 head coaches that we named, and it's all Sean McVay, Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan. Like, you don't get defensive coaches up there, and that's the sad truth. So, look, Raheem Morris, I'm sorry. I don't think he's going to work out. I didn't think it when he was hired, and I don't think it today. So I think that is your second head coach that you're going to lose. All right. And now here's the third head coach that I predict will be fired. And you might not like this one. Matt Eberflus, Chicago Bears. Matt Eberflus. I mean, it almost felt like the right thing would have been to get rid of Matt Eberflus last year, but the Bears went 5-3 down the stretch, and they finished with a 7-10 record, and that likely saved Matt Eberflus's job. Now, with that said, I think the sample size is much greater than that 5-3 stretch. I thought the defense played a huge role. Definitely acquiring Montez Sweat was huge for the Bears. The expectations are what will get Eberflus fired. Caleb Williams arrives in Chicago. There's a buzz in the city. You draft Rome Odunze. You bring in Keenan Allen. You got DeAndre Swift. I mean, on paper, you have a team that should go out there and win 10 football games. Okay? But the one thing about this team that is unknown is whether Matt Eberflus is a good head coach. This guy's regular season record is 10-24. Okay? I almost feel like it's just bad vibes. It's like, why wouldn't you have just torn down that one piece? And it's probably because Ryan Poles wanted this guy. All right? So Ryan Poles wants it to work. But you're bringing in a whole entire new team with new expectations, and you're turning a page, but you're trying to keep the old coach. And I just feel that this is going to backfire on the Bears. And look, as soon as the Bears don't get off to a really hot start, as soon as Caleb Williams doesn't look like he's going to miraculously just be Mahomes on day one, all of a sudden, Matt Eberflus is going to be on a hot chair early. And I think the expectations are ultimately what's going to cost him his job. I think it would have been smart for the Bears to hire somebody new, maybe like a Ben Johnson, offensive guy. And then even if the Bears have a down season, he has that job security for another season, right? Because now you're in the situation again where what if the Bears, win 6 games, but it's like, yeah, but look at all that new Matt Eberflus. Now he gets more grace and more grace. At some point, you got to start over. And I know that there are certain franchises that are pretty loyal to their coach, and I'm not one of those guys that thinks you need to tear it down. But in this specific case, I feel that Matt Eberflus has shown enough for us to not believe that he is going to be the Chicago Bears head coach for the long-term future. Antonio Pierce, I think he is going to be safe. Okay, Antonio Pierce immediately transformed the Raiders locker room. They were smoking cigars. They're having a good time. The locker room culture is a huge deal, and it was a big reason why Josh McDaniels was fired. I think the decision to retain Antonio Pierce, who is the interim head coach, as the club's full-time head coach, I think was a very good decision. I feel like Pierce deserves a chance to prove himself in 2024. He did finish his interim season with a 5-4 record. So, I mean, he's over 500, and he took over for a team that had no hopes to go to the playoffs, and he still found a way to win more games than he lost. Okay. Here is an interesting one. Jonathan Gannon, 26. I'm going to say Jonathan Gannon for the Cardinals is safe, okay? I think he works, okay? I got to remember, it's fired or works. I think Jonathan Gannon works. And I think part of the reason is like, look, I understand he only won 4 games as the Cardinals head coach last year. Arizona played inspired football at times, even though. And I think one of the things that we just talked about this with Antonio Pierce, it's one thing to lose football games. It's another thing to suffer well. Okay. Suffering well is something that is very difficult to explain, but look no further than the 2021 Detroit Lions to lay out the blueprint. The 2021 Lions found a way to lose week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Remember the 65-yard field goal that broke history from Justin Tucker's leg? They just kept finding these new creative ways to lose football games that were so heartbreaking, but every single week, the Lions showed up and they punched you in the mouth as hard as they could. And that is ultimately what told us this team is about to turn a corner. And we weren't wrong about that. And then when you get inspired football out of a team that's not winning, sometimes that can say a lot about the type of head coach that they have. So you look at the draft the Cardinals just had. They're bringing in so much. I think they drafted 12 players through the draft, a lot of guys that are going to start immediately. It's a lot of new. So Kyler Murray's returning from his torn ACL. Defensive coordinator Nick Rowlis got the most out of a lackluster depth chart last year. I think Trey Benson's going to be the best running back in this class. This year is going to tell us a lot about Jonathan Gannon and whether he is safe or fired. And ultimately, I think that the Cardinals are going to surprise a lot of people. They're going to win more games. I think they win at least 7 games this year, which is 3 more. And I think they're just going to continue to build on that. People forget that Kyler Murray went on the field, and say what you want about his leadership and the video games and the contract details about him studying. Watch the film. Okay, when Kyler Murray's on the field, he's one of the most difficult players in the NFL, period, to stop. Whether it's running or making up plays, being innovative, Kyler Murray, when he's playing his best football, is at a pretty high level. And for some reason, I don't know if it's his height, but it just seems like Kyler Murray, we're like, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of over that. Well, he was injured and he just came like, hold on, let's pump the brakes on jumping off the Kyler Murray train. If the Cardinals didn't believe in Kyler Murray, they wouldn't have let all that guaranteed money hit. And not only that, Kyler Murray's offense started flashing towards the end of the last season. They started to look like, okay, this team's starting to kick into gear. Kyler Murray looked like Kyler Murray, and now he's got a whole offseason with a bunch of new young talent. Jonathan Gannon, I think he's going to work out. Okay, and if you want to see how important he really is, look at the Eagles last year. Okay. They never recovered from losing Jonathan Gannon. Period. Number 27, Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh. And Robert Saleh isn't responsible for drafting Zach Wilson. And now we have the pleasure of calling Zach Wilson home, or being the home of Zach Wilson. I don't know if he's going to end up taking a single snap for the Broncos. I do know that he is a laughingstock of the league, that everybody thinks that he sucks, that he's a bust, and that he played all last season after Rodgers went down 4 plays into his campaign. And still, what I like about Saleh is that he still helped construct a New York defense that's been dominant over the past 2 seasons. Now, you can say what you want about him. You can't say that he's not a great defensive play caller. He is. And we're going to talk about the Jets in a little bit. But when it comes to defensive head coaches, they tend to fall down the list a little bit, because the NFL is not about, they say defense wins championships, but really look at the top offensive coaches in the league. Those are the teams that have been winning championships. Okay. Then you get Dennis Allen, and he is the last ranked head coach that I have, because first year head coaches I have in their own category, right? There's 4 of them. But coming in at 28th, Dennis Allen. I don't know how Dennis Allen still has the job. I really don't. The Saints improved to 9 wins in 2023, but still couldn't win their division, the AFC South. Dennis Allen was in the hot seat this offseason, but New Orleans intends to give the Allen-Derek Carr partnership one more year before cutting the cord. Look, this is what I would consider the writing is on the wall. Okay, Dennis Allen is 24-46. Not that many teams get that much grace. Like, he's going to need all the pieces to fall together on both sides of the ball. I don't think it's going to happen. Definitely fired. So, to recap, we have, I don't think Robert Saleh is going to be fired, because I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have the offense playing at a pretty high level, and the defense is going to be great. So Saleh by default is safe. Jonathan Gannon, I think, is safe. Okay. So the teams that are going to fire their head coaches next year, okay, I think it's going to be Brian Dable, Raheem Morris, Matt Eberflus, and Dennis Allen. So, just like this year, there will be 4 first-time head coaches on the sideline in 2025. And for those head coaches, it'll be too early to judge them. So, I listed them alphabetically rather than ranking them, because we just don't know. So, let's go through the 4 first-time head coaches this year. You got Brian Callahan for the Tennessee Titans. Okay, and the Titans aren't taking things slow in Callahan's first season. Tennessee spent heavily in free agency. They added veteran wide receivers like Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, Lloyd Cushenberry from Denver. He was PFF's most improved player for the Broncos all last year. And don't forget the blockbuster deal for L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe around second-year quarterback Will Levis. All that talent, putting it around Will Levis. Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Rick about this, and I said, are the Tennessee Titans going to be good? I mean, I know that it seems like, oh, it's not that easy, but it does seem like they added a lot of really strong playmakers around a quarterback that threw 4 touchdown passes his opening game. And although he collectively threw 4 from his, the rest of the season, I still think that we saw glimpses of Will Levis. And Callahan has a history. He worked with Joe Burrow, and perhaps more importantly, Cincinnati Bengals QB2 Jake Browning last year, and provided a preview of how the Titans' new head coach will end up leading a QB-friendly offense. Okay, but this is another head coach, and Mike Vrabel, defensive guy, well-respected, another pivot point. We're going offense, okay? Bring in the talent. We're not afraid to spend money. Let's get an offensive guy in the building. I think that history tells us that this is the proper road to be on at this point, at this year, 2024. It's just the way the NFL is right now. Okay, now we're going to look at Dave Canales. And having helped Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield to revitalize their careers over the past 2 seasons, Canales will attempt to turn around Carolina's head coach position. And also rookie quarterback Bryce Young, who ranked dead last in adjusted net yards per attempt. Only Zach Wilson finished worse in QBR or EPA. I mean, look, I don't think Bryce Young is going to work out anyway. So because of that, I don't think Dave Canales is going to work out, because it's going to be what came first, the chicken or the egg. Who cares? Fire them both. I think that's what's around the corner. especially when you see David Tepper. Is that the owner? Is that the owner for the Panthers, or is that the guy that hosted the presidential debate? I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. Regardless, who cares? You know what I'm talking about. The Panthers owner, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's going to exercise patience. He flipped out on a guy for wearing a hat. I don't think it's going to work out. Dave Canales, he probably doesn't get fired this year. Most coaches, even the ones that execute their job very poorly, get at least a second year. Gerard Mayo, and this one's interesting because Gerard Mayo is a defensive guy, but he's also somebody that you hear guys like Rob Gronkowski coming out of the woodwork saying that, oh, you could tell. You could always tell. You could always tell that Gerard Mayo was going to be a future NFL head coach during his days as the Patriots linebacker and just being an assistant coach. So he's taking over the greatest coach in league history. That's big shoes to fill, to say the least. But Mayo already seems to be embracing his role between New England's Bill Belichick's legacy and the club's future. Gerard Mayo, this is going to be interesting because that's why I'm not even ranking these, because who's going to start at quarterback? Is there going to be Drake May? Is he too talented to leave on the bench? How good is Jacoby Brissett? I mean, Jacoby Brissett isn't good enough to hold him off for that long. Let's be real. And how good are the Patriots offense going to be with a defensive head coach? A lot of questions to be answered. And then last but not least, but probably the most shocking of all firing, was the firing of Pete Carroll. And in comes Mike MacDonald, not McDonald, like the restaurant, MacDonald, like a Mack truck. Labeled defensive Sean McVay during the 2024 hiring process, Mike MacDonald has large shoes to fill after replacing Pete Carroll as Seattle's head coach. MacDonald pulled all the right levers as the Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator last year, while running the league's most modern unit, consistently disguising and varying his coverage looks. Countless Ravens players have talked about MacDonald's near obsessive level of detail. His preparedness was regularly on display in Baltimore. A lot of defensive coaches tend to be this way. Very interesting comparison there. A defensive Sean McVay. Hey, there's worse things to be called than that. So we'll have to wait and see. Geno Smith is the starting quarterback with Mike MacDonald. I'm not sure if ultimately Seattle will be better or worse, rather exactly what they are right now. And that's just another way to say that you have no idea. And that's okay too, right? We don't know. But those are the 4 head coaches that are new this year, and those are the ones that are coming. All right. The NFL released this article that I was really excited to go through because it went through and it listed an MVP for each team in the AFC and NFC. Okay. So each team has an MVP. And some of them I won't even bother you with. The Ravens, Lamar Jackson. Okay. But the Bills, Josh Allen. Bengals, Joe Burrow. Okay. Cleveland Browns. Okay. Now, I didn't write this article. This is written by an NFL writer, Eric Edholm. He's the lead draft writer for NFL.com. This is where it gets a little funny. Cleveland Browns. Okay. You would think Deshaun Watson would be the MVP for the Browns, especially when you consider how he looked before he ultimately sat out for the rest of the season, getting a season-ending shoulder surgery. It's always a tongue twister. Season-ending shoulder surgery. Season-ending shoulder surgery. Anyway, the writer doesn't have complete faith, apparently, that Deshaun Watson's going to elevate his play to team MVP levels this season. Even if there's still faint hope that he can regain his star, status from the Texans days. Watson is too much of a wild card to me, and it was hard not to notice the Browns offense, even when dealing with a rash of other injuries. He's saying it was hard not to notice that the Browns offense, even while dealing with all the injuries, seemed to operate a little smoother at times with Joe Flacco running the show in the playoff push after Watson was lost to the surgery. Yikes. That's kind of that's a bold statement. But he has a point, right? The Browns did look like a really good team, but I think it's much easier when you have the reigning defensive player of the year on your team and one of the league's, if not the league's top defense. That's why they were winning a lot of those games. It's not like Joe Flacco had a couple good games, don't get me wrong, but ultimately the Roosters came home to crow, and the Browns looked like what's that famous press conference? They are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook. If you want to crown them, then crown their ass. But we let them off the hook. We know who Joe Flacco is. Let's not act like Joe Flacco is in the same league as Deshaun Watson at this point in his career. Of course he's not. Deshaun Watson has been trying to get back to where he was with the Texans for a couple years now. If he does, then the Browns are a Super Bowl team, period. Okay? So I guess the writer is saying that I don't have faith that that happens. I don't know why. I just don't think that. I think it's more likely he does get back to where he was. But, I didn't write it. I just disagree with it. The Denver Broncos, Patrick Surtain. Now, this one happens to be up close and personal to me, of course, as a Denver Broncos fan. I had hopes that there'd be a different name on this list. Of course, I don't want Patrick Surtain to be the MVP of the Denver Broncos. Now, don't get me wrong. He is my favorite player on the team. Okay, I love Surtain. But if Surtain's the MVP, then what was Bo Nix? Okay. Now, the writer says that the MVP was never going to be one of the Broncos quarterbacks for him. Not until he sees more out of Jared Stidham or Bo Nix. Cortland Sutton could be that guy, especially with Jerry Jeudy having been traded to Cleveland, but Sutton apparently remains at loggerheads with the teams over his contracts, and productions will be dependent on how the QBs perform. Okay, so the way I see this is he's like, I don't have a lot of things to be certain about. Surtain is one of the things I can be certain about. And that is saying a lot, because Surtain's not even coming off his best year, to be honest. In 2023, he committed more penalties. He had 6 than he had in his first 2 seasons combined. Now, we're still talking about somebody that's playing at an absurdly high level. The fact that 6 penalties is his first 2 combined, is more than his first 2 combined, says more about how good he is than how bad he was last year, if that makes sense. But he believes that he has the best chance to be Denver's MVP in 2024, given the makeup of the offense and the fact that the Broncos' top defender right now, at least on paper, is Patrick Surtain. He was a more reliable tackler last season than he's been previously when tasked with containing wide receiver ones on a weekly basis. Look, there was a stat that came up. It was like Surtain and it was a list of wide receiver ones that he had been covering all season. And it was like collectively they had like 3 catches and 0 touchdowns. Surtain is a solid pick. Don't get me wrong. It's the safest pick. But it also, if you're a Broncos fan, tells you that Bo Nix didn't have that great of a season. Because honestly, if Bo Nix can lead this team to 9 wins and throw for 3,700 yards, 4,000 yards, he's going to end up being the MVP of the team. Houston Texans, don't overthink it. CJ Stroud. And now this was where I thought this was interesting with the Colts, because you saw the MVP odds and Anthony Richardson had the same odds. Was it Josh Allen? No, not Josh Allen. There was another player that had the same odds as Anthony Richardson. It didn't make any sense. It might have been Brock Purdy. I was like, how the hell did he get those odds? Do they know something about him we don't? But here the writer had Jonathan Taylor being the MVP of the Colts. The Colts have some standout performers on both sides of the ball who could make excellent choices if Anthony Richardson can make it through the season healthy or even relatively slow. He's an obvious candidate. But one of my bigger reasons for not picking Richardson is my lingering fear of the shoulder injury that ended his season early last year, a setback which still appeared to be limiting him as recently as last month. It's not terribly encouraging, even if general manager Chris Ballard said the QB will be a full go by training camp. Shoulder surgeries can be tricky, and I'll feel better about Richardson after seeing him log some real uninhibited snaps. Look, I have faith in Chris Ballard. He said that the QB is going to be a full go. I don't expect any setbacks personally from Anthony Richardson. Taylor's somewhat of a leap of faith pick, given what he's coming off his worst statistical season, and now he's turned in less than a complete body of work on the field for 2 years in a row. But I have faith that he's going to revert back to the production he put up in years 1 and year 2 of his pro careers when he was the Colts' unquestioned workhorse. Last year's contract drama is a distant memory, and he started looking healthier and more dynamic down the stretch. Last we saw him in Week 18, lost to Houston, Taylor tore up the Texans for 188 rushing yards. Look, and I never had any doubts about Jonathan Taylor. I know that my brother did. I had conversations about people on fantasy football like, really? You're going to draft Jonathan Taylor at 5 overall? I'm like, yeah, he's a top 3 running back in the league. Now, some people didn't think so, and coming off of this season and mixed with all the contract stuff, like, he's going to get back to where he was. And when he's playing his best, he can easily lead the NFL in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, in all of that. So I don't hate this pick for Jonathan Taylor, but I also don't love that they're predicting that Anthony Richardson can't make it through the season healthy. Just because he got injured his rookie year. He's still like 22 years old. So I don't know. I guess if you had to pick a running back over the quarterback, Jonathan Taylor's the guy to be. The Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence. Edge rusher Josh Allen was the MVP for the Jags last season as he ascended to new heights in his 5th pro campaign while Lawrence dipped back a bit. But now there's a massive extension. He's going to want to go out there and prove that he's worth all the money. I think we're going to see Lawrence take a step in the right direction again this season. I have no problem with this one. I think this is a no-brainer. Trevor Lawrence, of course, he's the most valuable player in this entire organization. That's why they paid him what he paid him. And Trevor Lawrence, I expect him to get back on playing playoff football next year. Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs. The Raiders. Now, he thought long and hard about potentially putting Devontae Adams here as the Raiders MVP. But the QB situation in Las Vegas right now lacks pizzazz. You could make a case for Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew combining to play solid ball. But instead, he went with Max Crosby. Okay? Truthfully, though, he says, I felt like Adams was good, not great in 2023. And this offense has just a few too many questions for me overall. From there, no disrespect to left tackle Colton Miller, I boiled this choice down to one of the Raiders' 2 top-notch defensive linemen. And as great as Christian Wilkins is individually, I went with Crosby because of his statistical dominance and because of the fact that he generated game-changing plays at a higher rate throughout his career. Bringing in Wilkins could do wonders for Crosby, who to this point has wreaked incredible havoc without having a ton of elite level help alongside him. There is this worry in the back of my head that Crosby's long-term longevity might become a concern in a few years, given that he's been logging a lot of snaps lately. But I honestly wouldn't put a 20 sack, 30 tackles for a loss, 5 forced fumble type season past him. And look, Max Crosby has been the best player on the Raiders for quite some time now. I think especially when you consider Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew is their quarterback situation, this is the safest pick. No problems with Max Crosby being the MVP of the Raiders. The Chargers, Justin Herbert. Okay. The Dolphins. Here's an interesting one because you could clearly make a case that Tua Tagovailoa, who was mostly terrific last year and stayed healthy, would be the MVP. But there's another guy that's been trying to break the single season receiving record named Tyreek Hill. And when Tyreek Hill does that, is it going to be considered Tua Tagovailoa so great, or is it going to be Tyreek Hill so great? Of course, it's going to be Tyreek Hill so great, especially when you see that a lot of his 80-yard touchdowns are 10-yard receptions, and then he just does the rest yards after catch. So Tyreek Hill is going to get the credit, not Tua. He he could really do it. He could have done it last year, to be totally honest. He dealt with that ankle injury late in the season, but he was on pace to break Calvin Johnson's receiving yards record before that ankle injury. Miami did win the one game he missed last season. They beat the Jets 30-0, but New York's 4 turnovers were the story of that one. When Hill is on the field, he dictates vastly different coverage and forces defenses to honor his elite game-breaking speed. That's so true. I'm a little surprised Mike McDaniel hasn't dabbled more with Hill as a runner like Andy Reid did with Hill during his time with the Chiefs. But there's also the matter of keeping the best player healthy as possible. Yeah, I think Tyreek Hill is the MVP of the Dolphins. I don't got a problem with it. Okay. This one was tricky. The New England Patriots. The New England Patriots. Who's going to be the MVP of the New England Patriots? Okay. Like I said, this one's tricky, to put it nicely. There's no obvious candidate here. The person that the writer ended up picking, I agree with, though. Okay. On offense, he considered Ramondre Stevenson and offensive lineman Michael Onwenu. On defense, Matthew Judon and safeties Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers came to mind. It was hard to back Onwenu considering the Patriots' O-line questions on the whole. I think they don't even have a left tackle right now. And the defenders each came with drawbacks. Judon has 32 sacks in 38 games with the Patriots, but turns 32 years old, and he's coming off a major injury. Stevenson's fresh off of an underwhelming campaign, 4.4 yards per touch, 4 touchdowns. But 2 years ago, he was one of the few reliable producers in a stagnant New England offense. And honestly, bringing in Ezekiel Elliott was the worst thing for Ramondre Stevenson. They thought that they were going to have this 1-2 punch. Ramondre Stevenson is a workhorse back, and he's finally going to get back to being that workhorse once again in 2024. He's a quality downhill runner, and he's a capable receiver, and he's really good at pass protection. So there's really nothing that he can't do. The former Browns offensive coordinator oversaw 4 straight top 12 rushing attacks in Cleveland, spearheaded by bigger backs in the Stevenson mold. So Ramondre is my MVP flyer for now, while the rest of the offense remains a deconstructed ship in a bottle. This is a great point. Okay, the former Browns offensive coordinator oversaw 4 straight top 12 rushing attacks in Cleveland. So the philosophy, the defensive coach and Brian Flores, the running the football, Ramondre Stevenson is going to be a large part of the offense. They also drafted some receivers in the 5th round that I really like. I think it was the 5th or 4th round. Like the Patriots are in a rebuild But I think they'll be better than they were last year. And I think Ramondre Stevenson is going to be a big part of why. The New York Jets, this is crazy, okay? Because the New York Jets MVP, obviously, it's got to be Aaron Rodgers. And if you thought that you could go somewhere else with the pick, I urge you to watch game film on the Jets of last season and remind yourself what the Jets look like without Aaron Rodgers. Because clearly, that is one way that we can determine value is when you're not on the field, what your team looks like. What did Peyton Manning, or rather, what did the Colts look like when Manning missed an entire year with a neck surgery? They went 1-15 and drafted Andrew Luck with the number 1 overall pick. That shows you the type of value a player has. So when the writer went with Breece Hall, I think it's controversial to say the least. So let's talk about why he passed not only Aaron Rodgers, but Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams. Because he does go on to say he didn't arrive at this pick easily. Okay. And I'm like, I don't care how you arrived here. You're wrong, but let's give him a shot. Okay. He said both defenders are terrific and the Jets defense might still have to do a lot of heavy lifting for the team. This also isn't some thinly veiled anti-Rodgers entry because I think they clearly need him to win, but we might not see vintage Rodgers in a season where he's turning 41, even if he'll clearly help Wilson thrive more as a receiver. Ultimately, Hall looked so good to me down the stretch after an up and down start to the season, some of which was clearly not his fault. In the Jets' final 3 games, he ran for 357 yards, 3 touchdowns, and caught 23 passes and another touchdown, receiving touchdown, and added a 2-point conversion for good measure. Now, factor in Hall being another year removed from an ACL surgery, and it's not hard to see how he could be a massive part of this offense as a runner and receiver. Sure, absolutely. Is he going to be play a bigger role than Aaron Rodgers? Look, what was his reasoning for not going with Rodgers? Was that we may not see vintage Rodgers in a season where he's turning 41. Okay, but you don't need to see vintage Rodgers for the Jets. Okay, you don't need to see vintage Aaron Rodgers for Aaron Rodgers to be the Jets' most valuable player this year. Okay, the Jets, without him, won 7 games. Okay, with him, if they win 12, they won 7 games with Zach frickin' Wilson. Zach Wilson was the only quarterback that in some stats were as bad as Bryce Young. I mean, the Jets were historically bad offensively and still won 7 games. So this whole thing about, oh, we're not going to see vintage Rodgers. He's 41. Okay, vintage Rodgers is here. Zach Wilson is here. These are opposite ends of the spectrum. We don't need Rodgers to go to what he vintage, right? Can he just go here? Because if he can go here and this wins you 7 games, this has got to be what gets you to 11, 12. And if the Jets go from winning 7 games to 12, it's not going to be a mystery of why the Jets are in the playoffs and why they have double-digit wins. Everyone's going to know it's because they got a quarterback. This is what we call in the military nuking something. The nukes. It's a designation for people that deal with nuclear power stuff. They're called nukes, and they're normally intelligent people, and they score really high on their ASVAB test. And sometimes we say that you're nuking something when you're overthinking it. Sometimes it's not as complicated as it seems. All of the teams with a top 10 quarterback, of course, the quarterback should be the MVP vote. This is the one where they decided to go with Breece Hall. And I love Breece Hall, but Breece Hall was there all last year. Sure. Okay. He didn't get going till late. I can get with all that, but no, that's about where I draw the line. there's no way. Now I could understand going with the Jonathan Taylor over Anthony Richardson or something like that, but I would have felt the same way if they said that Isaiah Pacheco was the MVP of the Chiefs. It's like, what are you talking about? And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is interesting because he goes with TJ Watt. Okay. The quarterback play should be better in Pittsburgh one way or another, but I can't put enough weight behind either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields to go with either here. Watt is the easier selection as the centerpiece of a very good defense that will remain on the superior side of this team. Last season was another brilliant one from Watt, whose next big milestone will be passing the 100-sack mark before he turns 30 years old. Short of a major injury, I can't see how he doesn't dominate again next year. Surrounded by a strong supporting cast and working with an offense that's better, but still the lesser of the two major units on this team. I don't got a problem with this one just because Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, we know what both of them are. I don't expect them to just go out there and wow us. I expect the Steelers, if you look at the way they drafted, they got physical, just nasty players. Offensive line, they're going back to the trenches. They don't pick up Najee Harris's option. They're going to be a nasty physical football team, and they're going to lean on their defense. And who is the centerpiece of the defense? It's TJ Watt. He should have won the MVP last year. Some people felt like he was snubbed when they gave it to Myles Garrett. But TJ Watt is, just such a disruptor. Look at the Steelers' win-loss record when he plays and when he doesn't play, and you'll know who the MVP is right away. And our last AFC team is the Tennessee Titans, and this is one that might shock you. Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons. So you thought maybe Will Levis, you thought he has another chance to succeed this season. We talked about Brian Callahan coming in to help the O-line and adding pass catching power with Calvin Ridley. Even with the loss of Derrick Henry, I think you can say that this is a net positive on that side of the ball for Tennessee. Offensively, they're in a good direction. But if there's one player on offense, either DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley, who will be singularly elite, I suspect that they'll sort of cancel each other out, and Levis remains a tad too unproven. Why not pick a dominant three-down multi-technique defender entering his prime years? Simmons is coming off a knee injury and wasn't quite as dominant last season as he was 2 years prior, but there's no doubt that he could come back in a big way and perhaps lead a surprise revival for the Titans in 2024. Pass. Sorry. I would go with Calvin Ridley before I would even go with Jeffrey Simmons or DeAndre Hopkins, but ultimately I think Tony Pollard could even be a good pick because Tony Pollard and the Callahan likes to get his running backs a lot of passes, and Tony Pollard, such a great pass catching back. And I just don't know honestly, if you're predicting that the Tennessee Titans are going to lead a surprise revival for the Titans, then there's going to be a lot more splash players on this team than Jeffrey Simmons. I give all the credit to the defensive lines, and we're going to talk about the best defensive lines in a second. But if I had to make my pick, I got to go with Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley did not have a good season last year with the Jags, but Calvin Ridley with DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's going to get back to playing at a high level. And I think Will Levis is going to benefit from this. But this is one of those situations where if you're a Titans fan, you're like, any MVP other than Will Levis is an L for us. And just like how I felt about the Broncos, just how the Steelers feel about TJ Watt or the Jets, any team who the MVP pick is not the quarterback, you're disappointed because that just means that, Some quarterbacks are grand slam picks like CJ Stroud and Patrick Mahomes. And then you have the other teams that don't have that guy. And you're hoping that you do. And each team has a guy right now. He might not be the guy in 2 years, but he's going to have an opportunity like Daniel Jones this year, like Bo Nix, like Anthony Richardson. There's plenty of guys every single season that have a lot to prove. And you're damn right they want to be the MVP of their team. It's the most important position of any sport. So if your quarterback's not the MVP of your own team, it kind of tells me everything you need to know about that team. And Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray, Atlanta Falcons, Kirk Cousins, Chicago Bears. This was weird. Okay, Chicago Bears MVP, DJ Moore. Now, I can't believe it because obviously Caleb Williams is one of the most high-profile draft picks in a long time. But the writer says that this was no layup choice, as there are cases to be made for defenders such as Montez Sweat and Jalen Johnson, or even rookie Caleb Williams. If Williams turns into CJ Stroud-esque rookie season, he'll be an easy selection, but Stroud is more the exception to the rule as far as first-year quarterbacks go. And levying that level of year-one expectations borders on the unrealistic. I agree. Instead, I'll choose Moore. Even if he's no slam dunk selection, there's even a case to be made that Moore's 2024 numbers could fall below his career high totals from last season. 1,364 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, given that the Bears added Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze and DeAndre Swift. But if there's an individual player who holds the key to helping unlock Williams more than Moore, I don't know who it is. In the 12 games Justin Fields started and finished last season, Moore averaged 91.8 receiving yards per game and caught half of Fields' touchdown passes. Even with a stronger receiving corps this year, Moore figures to be a huge part of Williams' development in his rookie season and, well, beyond. So if you are a Bears fan, you're really hoping that DJ Moore is in your MVP. You're hoping that Caleb Williams turns in that CJ Stroud type season. But the writer here saying, that is the exception, not the rule. I don't care who you are, whether you're Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, right? People forget that they talk about CJ Stroud is more the exception, not the rule. CJ Stroud wasn't even the first quarterback picked in his own class. So, yeah, I agree. But still, Caleb Williams would probably have to be my pick just because the expectations, how could DJ Moore have a better year than Caleb Williams? Because let me put it this way. If Caleb Williams drops back and throws a 15-yard touchdown reception to DJ Moore, people are going to look at that play and say, oh, DJ Moore caught the ball. Yeah, he does that. But on the other flip side of it, when they're talking about Caleb Williams, the emotion's going to be way more. They're going to be way more emotional about it. Did you see that throw? That flick of the wrist? No, Caleb Williams, he's the truth. He's the guy. So, just like how you can put people on a pedestal, blow everything out of proportion, I do think even the simple things Caleb Williams does right next season will be amplified by the fact that he's Caleb Williams, where I don't know if DJ Moore is going to have that same privilege. The Dallas Cowboys. And last year, it was definitely Dak Prescott. I mean, Dak Prescott played some of the best football I've ever seen. Best football of his career. He led the league in completions last season and touchdown passes, and he finished second to Lamar Jackson in MVP voting. So he's definitely a strong candidate. But the writer decides to go with Micah Parsons here. Okay? He says, first off, Dak had a bit of a hard time stringing together back-to-back great seasons over his career, and the Cowboys have some roles to iron out at receiver and along the offensive line. Parsons is my pick to be Dallas's MVP this season, although his candidacy is not a slam dunk either. Even with a career best 14 sacks in 2023 and the high level of play we've come to expect, there were a few games where Parsons was notably quiet, especially down the stretch as cracks started forming in the defense. I still think he's a defensive player of the year in his future, perhaps even this season. Although the loss of defensive coordinator Dan Quinn also opens this pick up to scrutiny. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm sorry, but like Mike McCarthy's still there, Dak Prescott's still there. We're talking about the MVP of the regular season. Yeah. What are we really predicting? That Dak Prescott can't put together another good season? I don't know if I'm buying that. Like I said, he was playing some of the best ball of his career last year. If anything, he looks like he's in his prime right now. And keep in mind, like, your prime, I mean, Manning in Denver, you know when Manning's prime was? Some people say it was 2010. Some people say it was 2008. Manning's best season came in 2013. Look at his year in 2012 and 2013. Those 2 years, back-to-back years, were absolutely insane. 55 touchdown passes. No, Dak Prescott is, yeah, I mean, maybe he hasn't put together strong campaigns back-to-back, but it hasn't been anything that I've noticed as a fan that watches up close. So I still think Dak Prescott ends up being the MVP, especially with Dan Quinn gone. Expect the defense to take a step back. Can't say the same thing about Dallas and their offense. Detroit Lions, Jared Goff. I mean, I totally agree. Jared Goff's playing some of his best football right now, and he's the leader of this team. I got no problem with that. Green Bay, Jordan Love, for sure. There's really no other logical pick than Jordan Love. I mean, you'd just be trying to be different. Matthew Stafford for the Rams. Once again, Stafford is an obvious pick in this situation, and I think he does want to get another Super Bowl before he retires, and I think he can this year. Minnesota Vikings, Justin Jefferson. So the Vikings, they're another team where you can make a pretty strong case that a non-QB is the best player on their team, especially with Kirk Cousins gone now to the Atlanta Falcons. Minnesota is going to be counting on Jefferson even more this season because Sam Darnold and /JJ McCarthy are going to be, one of those is going to be getting the football in JJ's hands as many times as possible. And there was a strange dynamic last season with the Vikings going 2-8 in games where Jefferson appeared. Do you guys remember that? He had a hamstring wiping out nearly half of his season last year. And Cousins was injured for half of those 10 games, and 6 of the 8 losses were by 1 score. But it was still worth noting that the Vikings were going 2-8 in games where Jefferson appeared, and they were winning their games that Jefferson was sitting out. Like Jefferson still managed to average 119 receiving yards per game. He's the clear-cut alpha receiver for right now, no matter who's at QB. But it was a little strange, to say the least. New Orleans Saints, Derek Carr. Now, I'm going to go with Chris Olave here. I think Derek Carr is fine, but I think Chris Olave is special. Okay? And I think when you get into these MVP conversations, you got to have some special. Chris Olave was, I think he's being held back so hard right now. I think he could be a top 10 wide receiver in the league if he's not already. And the fact is Derek Carr hasn't been playing really good football, to say the least. Olave's got a ton of talent, but Carr, you could make an argument, is more important. But I got to go Chris Olave here. And Bill agrees with me. He goes, agreed on Olave. Olave, I mean, he could still put together a top 10 season. And if he does, and the New Orleans Saints are 9-8, and Derek Carr threw for 3,700 yards, but Olave is a top 10 receiver, he's going to be the star of the team. He is. And you could even make a case for Alvin Kamara, but Kamara not coming off a strong season. Olave is young. He's ready. I mean, he's due for a huge season. The question is, can Derek Carr get him the ball? And can they have a good chemistry between them? But yeah, the writer goes with Derek Carr. I'm going with Chris Olave. The New York Giants. Whew. The MVP of the New York Giants. Who is it going to be? Well, Brian Burns. Brian Burns. Burns might have been the Panthers MVP a year ago with Derek Brown, and I think he's going to thrive on a Giants defense that features an emerging Kayvon Thibodeau on the opposite side, and Dexter Lawrence in the middle. We just talked about this last week. The offense lost Saquon Barkley. It still has offensive line issues to iron out, and there's that curious QB situation to figure out. New York isn't likely to be winning games 38-35 this season. If the Giants are going to surprise people this season, the defensive line likely will be the big reason why. The Burns trade and extension felt like one of the savviest foul swoops of the entire offseason. Some teams might not have viewed Burns with the same reverence because of his solid but hardly eye-popping sack numbers, but the tape reveals a consistently disruptive edge capable of earning All-Pro honors in New York. And I got to agree with this one. But I mean, I would probably go Kayvon Thibodeau over Brian Burns because I just think Kayvon Thibodeau is due for, like I said, I think he can have an 18-sack season this year, especially with Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence. But the question is, who's going to be the beneficiary of the addition? Is Brian Burns going to benefit? Is Kayvon Thibodeau going to benefit? Who's getting doubled? This is true, though. Anytime that you have all these holes at question, or all these question marks on offense, you look to what you do have. And what the Giants do have is one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. So I got no problem with them going with Brian Burns. And Bill said, that's a good call on Burns, actually. He was my first thought. Because you've got both. They can't double team either, so it works well for both of them. Yeah, it was kind of like when DeMarcus Ware came over and Von Miller couldn't be doubled. Like, I remember we had Elvis Dumervil also. Wow. Elvis Dumervil. Was that Elvis Dumervil? And was that Von Miller with Elvis Dumervil? Like, anytime you can get a pair of solid edges, it makes life so much better for the other. It feeds off of each other. It's the beast that eats himself and continues to grow. Jalen Hurts for the Eagles. This isn't a hard one. Here's one that I'm going to throw this out there, and this question is like, ooh, you're inviting the wolves to your door here, okay? The San Francisco 49ers. Now, who is the MVP of the San Francisco 49ers? First off, the writer goes out of his way to let you know that this is not any Brock Purdy slander, and that he appreciates his stunning and unexpected growth as much as anyone, and freely admits to have written him off as a prospect coming out of Iowa State. But then he goes on to say, let's be honest with ourselves. CMC is as much of the engine of this offense as anyone else in Kyle Shanahan's share the well system. McCaffrey was last year's Offensive Player of the Year, and he was third in MVP voting. For a spell last season, he might have been the MVP favorite as a running back in 2023. I don't know if he'll ever win the league MVP award, as quarterbacks have had a hammerlock on the award for decades now, but if there's any non-QB who deserves it, CMC might be the guy. that makes him a bit stronger of a candidate for the 49ers than Purdy, who's the ultimate distributor. I think who cares? Let's just say this. They are both extremely valuable. Okay. I know that the whole point of the game is to pick one, but in some cases, you're guessing. You don't really know. I mean, what do we know that the 49ers had a losing record before they acquired CMC via trade from the Panthers. We also know that the 49ers didn't lose a single game until Brock Purdy broke his elbow in a playoff game since the acquisition of Christian McCaffrey. But what we don't know is that if Brock Purdy was on the field without Christian McCaffrey, if he would have the same success that he's having with him. But you could say the same thing vice versa for Christian McCaffrey. Okay, Christian McCaffrey's value has, of course, increased since leaving Carolina, leaving the Panthers and coming to the 49ers. He wasn't an MVP candidate in Carolina, and he was putting up great numbers. He was the easy front runner, fantasy football-wise, to be the first overall draft pick almost every single year. But it wasn't until he got to the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan's offense that you started hearing these type of awards, third in MVP voting. Look, I just think the 49ers are a really well-built team, and it's not one or two pieces that's holding it all together. It's many pieces, and the weakest link on the 49ers is still a pretty strong link. This is just a very well-built, tough football team. Whether you have Brock Purdy or CMC as your MVP of this team, or even Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel or Nick Bosa, I just don't think like you can make a case for any of them, and that's the whole point. DK Metcalf for the Seattle Seahawks. And Bill said because you got both, they can't double team either, so it works for both of them. Yeah. Oh, I read that one already. DK Metcalf for the Seahawks. Now, I was thinking, really? Geno Smith? Well, he wasn't as good as he was in 2022 last season, so that might be part of it. And they acquired Sam Howell, which I've been telling you guys, keep an eye on that one because that is a story that deserves more attention than it got. And I do think I could see Howell seeing the field in the season coming up. So I'll just leave that alone right there. But this is what he said. There might be a division of labor at QB, but they're not planning to take Metcalf off the field anytime soon, and for good reason. Tyler Lockett might be entering the twilight phase of his career. JSN could pick up extra additional touches, but I can't veer off Metcalf as the biggest beneficiary of the new scheme. Grubb wants to dial up the big plays, and there are few better impact receivers out there, no matter who is at quarterback. If I had to pick a different player than DK Metcalf, I would have to go with Kenneth Walker. Yeah, don't forget how good Kenneth Walker is. Okay, I think Kenneth Walker could be a solid pickup or a solid MVP pick of the team. I get it with the Geno Smith, Sam Howell not wanting to pick any of them. Totally get it. DK Metcalf, definitely the safest. And DK Metcalf's going in to year 6, so still got plenty of impactful seasons ahead of him. I fully disagree with this one, and I'm going to let him have it. Okay, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their MVP. Who do you think it is? I don't know. Maybe the guy that beat the Eagles in the playoffs or went toe-to-toe with the Detroit Lions who almost went to the Super Bowl. The guy that looked like he was playing some of the best footballs in December. The first quarterback to ever have a perfect QBR in Lambeau in December. I'm talking about Baker Mayfield. That's who the MVP of Tampa is, and instead the writer goes with Antoine Winfield Jr. And not just that, but he goes on to say that I could see a slight regression for Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. Now, he says he's not predicting a big downturn or anything, but it's not going to be easy to reach the same plateau Tampa Bay hit by the end of last season, especially with Dave Canales jumping ship to Carolina. But keep in mind that Baker Mayfield does have continuity because the offensive coordinator he worked with when he was with the Rams and Sean McVay. So that move was to make this transition simple and not so turbulent. And I think that that's going to work. I also think Baker getting that $100 million, I think he proved to himself last year that he can play football at a high level. And I think there's few things as dangerous as a person that knows their worth. And Baker Mayfield is playing with that swagger again. Okay? Now, he's putting his money behind the Bucs' most consistent impact player in Antoine Winfield, who somehow remains underrated in spite of being an NFL legacy and have turned in a brilliant first 4 seasons. Are we witnessing the start of a Hall of Fame career? I don't say that lightly. The highest paid safety in the league, Winfield has 15 sacks, 11 forced fumbles, 8 recoveries, and 7 interceptions in his career. And he has an innate knack for making the timeliest of plays when the Bucs need him the most. A special young player in the midst of stardom. Don't get me wrong, I love Antoine Winfield Jr. I think he's the second best safety in the league. I would still probably go with Derwin James, number 1. Justin Simmons is incredible as well, but Baker Mayfield is the leader of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's not going anywhere. So, yeah, I disagree with that one. The Commanders, and this is the final NFC team, and, well, you could probably guess who it's going to be. I said this during the draft. I said it during the offseason. I don't think that Caleb Williams is going to be the best quarterback drafted in 2024. Just like last year, Bryce Young, who was drafted number 1 overall, was not the best quarterback in the draft class. I think that it's going to go to the number 2 overall pick for 2 years in a row. And I agree with the writer in Jaden Daniels being the MVP of the Washington Commanders. Earlier, we went through how Caleb Williams might not be the Bears team MVP, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't think any rookie could win that honor. Every situation is different, and the Commanders do have a top-tier playmaker in Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, who could easily provide the same level of comfort for Daniels as DJ Moore can for Williams. But if the thinly built Daniels can make it through his first season relatively healthy, I think he has a slightly better chance of being the Commanders' most important player this season. One reason is that Chicago has a stronger all-around roster right now than Washington does. But another reason is that Daniel also figures to be a heavier runner than Williams, which I believe makes Daniels just as much of an offensive rookie of the year threat, if not more. He leads the Commanders to the franchise's first winning record since 2016. Daniels could have a Stroud-like effect on this franchise. I'm expecting a very encouraging first year from the number 2 overall pick, and I agree with every single statement made, every word in those sentences, perfectly orchestrated. Yes, Jaden Daniel is going to, he's going to be good, okay? All you have to do is look at a trajectory, see a player improve every single year, and then you see the jump that he made last year. You don't turn back from that. Just like CJ Stroud's jump wasn't a fluke, Jaden Daniels was not supposed to go number 2 overall, but there was really no other choice by the time college football ended. There was no other option. And Jaden Daniels is going to continue to make those strides at the NFL level. And the Commanders with Dan Quinn can keep the scoring relatively down. Jaden Daniels will have a chance to get this team close to a winning record, something that they haven't had since 2016. Jaden Daniels, MVP for the Commanders. I'm buying all the Jaden Daniels stock I can. I'm all in on Jaden Daniels. And let me know in the comments if you guys agree, disagree, if you think which ones are stupid, which ones are not. I did have a couple things I wanted to go over. One of the things that I wanted to do was go through an article that was written by Zoltan Bude on PFF's website, pff.com, and it was the 2024 NFL offensive lines ranked. And I thought that would be a cool one to kind of fly through really quick. And then we're going to look at single player position rankings, and we'll kind of fly through this, okay? So this is ranking. First off, these are unit rankings. So the first unit that we're looking at is the offensive line, okay? Who do you think's number one? Who do you think is the number one offensive line in the NFL? Put it in the chat. Let me know in the chat who you got. And Bill says, O-line ranks, just put the Giants at 32 already. And Bill says Jets. Jets? Offensive line? Yeah, Jets do have a good offensive line. But no, the number one offensive line, according to PFF in the 2024 season, is the Detroit Lions. When healthy, the Lions' offensive line was arguably the best unit in the NFL last season. Right tackle Penei Sewell was the league's highest graded offensive lineman. Frank Ragnow earned the team's top spot among centers. Although the unit lost right guard Jonah Jackson in free agency, the Lions signed veteran guard Kevin Zeitler, who ranked 15th in PFF grades among guards in 2023. Yeah. Don't forget, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, this offensive line, Ben Johnson still there. Like, the Detroit Lions, they're going to be the real deal, right? That's one thing these teams have in common. You got to have a strong offensive line, right? You don't have to have a strong offensive line to be in the playoffs, but every team in the playoffs has a strong offensive line. You know what they say? Like, not everybody that listens to this band is Gen Z, but all of Gen Z listens to this band. Not all of Gen Z listens to this band, but everyone that listens to the band is Gen Z. Okay, you're not saying every team has to have an offensive line to make the playoffs. You're just saying that all the teams in the postseason probably do have a top 10 offensive line. Number 2, the Philadelphia Eagles. When the Eagles fielded the NFL's best offensive line over the past couple of years, there were questions about the unit's cohesiveness following Jason Kelce's retirement. Cam Jurgens, who's Kelce's replacement, has played only 45 NFL snaps so far. Jurgens is being replaced at right guard by Tyler Steen, who played just 71 snaps on offense as a rookie and was not overly impressive. So that's the main reason the Eagles are coming in at number 2. Number 3, and also alluding to the point of Jonathan Taylor being the MVP of the Indianapolis Colts, the Colts have the 3rd best offensive line in the league. The Colts offensive tackle duo is arguably the best in the league, with left tackle Bernard Ryman and right tackle Brandon Smith each finished among the 7th highest graded offensive tackles in 2023. Veteran Ryan Kelly put together the best season of his career as the highest graded center in pass protection. Continuity is also on the Colts offensive line side. All 5 starting offensive linemen returned for 2024. Perhaps the Colts are a little low on this list. They should be maybe above the Eagles. At number 4, the Cleveland Browns. Injuries derailed the Browns' 2023 offensive line, with neither offensive tackle finishing the season and the interior offensive lineman missing time too. The unit could be among the best in the NFL when healthy, and it's also evident that the Browns have good depth in second-year offensive tackle DeJuan Jones, who might even earn the starting job at right tackle. Let me just write this out. Here we go. NFL top O-lines. All right. And rounding out the top 5, the New York Jets. And that was Bill's guess for number 1 after performing as one of the worst units of the 2023 season. The Jets' offensive line mightily improved this season. Veteran tackles Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses both finished among the top 10 highest graded offensive tackles last year, and they could form one of the best duos in the league. The Jets also get back one of the best young guards in the league, Elijah Vera Tucker, who missed most of 2023. And you're putting Aaron Rodgers behind that offensive line and Breece Hall. Watch out. Watch out. The Jets are going to be very, very good. Number 6, the Atlanta Falcons, and they're going to appreciate this because I'll tell you right now, the Vikings, you might be wondering, where do the Vikings rank on this list of strong offensive linemen? And the Minnesota Vikings are 13th. So you got definitely a better situation for Kirk Cousins. Atlanta coming in at number 6, just missing the top 5. Drew Dalman's breakout 2023 season significantly helped this unit, especially in run blocking, as Dalman finished with the 3rd highest run blocking grade among centers. Chris Lindstrom was also once again the highest graded guard in the NFL. They also got Dalton Reisner to come back. It's not in here, but that is something I'm also tracking. Dalton Reisner had a good season with the Vikings, or I'm thinking of the Vikings. Sorry. All 5 starting Falcons offensive linemen will return for the 2024 season, and the unit could further improve if second-year guard Matthew Bergeron takes a step forward. Coming in at number 7, the Kansas City Chiefs. Joe Thuney might be the best pass-blocking guard in the league, while Creed Humphrey is now often considered the best center in the NFL. Right guard Trey Smith could be the league's most underrated offensive lineman despite being the 10th highest graded guard in 2023. Those 3 form arguably the NFL's top interior trio. Whereas the interior is stout, there are many questions surrounding the Chiefs' offensive tackles, including whether Jawan Taylor can bounce back after a disappointing season. And newsflash, he can't. Jawan Taylor has been disappointing for many, many years in a row. I don't know why people keep thinking that they can get good football out of Jawan Taylor. You can't. The best thing you can do is put him on an offensive line that is held together by other pieces, and he's going to be the weakest link on the chain. I guess if you had to have a weak link on the chain, having the NFL's top interior trio would be the team to do it, especially with Mahomes and how hard he is to sack. Coming in at number 8, you have the Buffalo Bills. Right tackle Spencer Brown went from being the 73rd ranked offensive tackle in PFF overall grade to the 32nd best mark in 2023. Taking this offensive line to a new level, we have yet to see how well the interior can hold up after center Mitch Morse's departure, though. The Bills will move Connor McGovern from guard to center and introduce David Edwards, who played mostly as a 6th offensive lineman in 2023. And we really did see, with Cook in the running game got going, like the Bills actually had a legitimate running game, like a one that you really believe, not one where it's just like we're running the ball to stay balanced. It's like, no, you better sell out because we're going to run the football all over you. And the offensive line was a huge part of that. Pittsburgh Steelers coming in at 9. This is true. The Steelers spent back-to-back first-round picks on offensive tackles and selected center Zach Frazier in the second round of this year's draft. Those investments should pay off soon, as the team already got solid play from its guards in 2023. Isaac Samalo, who Pittsburgh signed as a free agent last year, put together a good season, and he finished the year as the 12th highest graded guard in the NFL. Rounding out the top 10, we have the Dallas Cowboys. It didn't help that Terrence Steele had a disappointing 2023 season coming back from injury. The team still has one of the better duos in Tyler Smith and Zach Martin, but it is unknown how much quality is around them. At number 11, the Chicago Bears, and this is part of the reason why teams or commentators have been saying that few quarterbacks are ever drafted into a more favorable position than Caleb Williams finds himself in with the Chicago Bears. The Bears' offensive line, as it got healthy, was one of the top units in the NFL towards the second half of last season. Center Ryan Bates is expected to complete the unit and bring it to the next level. In Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright, who they drafted in the first round, not just this year, but last year, Chicago has a promising young offensive tackle duo, and Tevin Jenkins, who performed extremely well since moving to guard, earning a 70.0 plus PFF overall grade the last 2 seasons. At number 12, the Chargers. And you knew if there was one thing that Harbaugh was going to do, it was get a good offensive line together. We may talk about the Chargers a year from now as having the NFL's best offensive tackle duo. Joining Rashawn Slater at left tackle is rookie Joe Alt at right tackle, selected with the 5th overall pick. Los Angeles also signed Bradley Bozeman to play center following Corey Lindsey's retirement. The best coaches in the NFL understand that having a good offensive line is not a luxury. It is a necessity. When Sean Payton took over for the Broncos, the first thing he did was bring in Mike McGlinchey from the 49ers and Ben Powers from the Ravens. He was not shy in spending money, but other positions were not like that. It almost seemed that he was only willing to spend that kind of money on the offensive line. And just like that, Jim Harbaugh's got no problem saying bye to Malik Neighbors or all the fancy, flashy players that were available at number 4 overall or 5 overall. No, they went with Joe Alt because you know what you're going to get. He's going to be a star, and the Chargers now have themselves a serious offensive line that they can put Justin Herbert behind, who has struggled to stay healthy last season. At 13, you got the Vikings. We talked about the Vikings earlier because we said Kirk Cousins is in a better situation. The interior trio of Dalton Reisner, Garrett Bradbury, and Ed Ingram is average at best. The offensive tackle duo of Darisaw and Brian O'Neill makes the Vikings line above average. So we're getting towards not quite mediocre, but we're flirting with it. At number 14, we have the Green Bay Packers. Rasheed Walker, a 2022 7th rounder, appears to be David Bakhtiari's David Bakhtiari's. There you go. His successor at left tackle. And while he went through some growing pains in 2023, his 66.3 PFF overall grade ranked 44th among offensive tackles. On the other side of the line, Zach Tom built a strong rookie campaign and even better 2023. The Packers lost John Runyan in free agency, but Sean Ryan was rotating with Runyan at right guard towards the end of last season, bringing some experience to the position. And right underneath the Green Bay Packers at 14, we have my Denver Broncos coming in at number 15. Number 15. Right tackle Mike McGlinchey got off to a rough start in Denver. I actually met him after the Raiders game. I met him. I got his autograph. It's on that jersey right there. I'm pointing at it. On my Von Miller jersey. I told him, I said, it's a long season. And he was like, yeah, no doubt. Like, I'm not even worried about it. Well, Mike McGlinchey did get off to a rough start in Denver, but he also improved as the season went on, and he ranked 39th in PFF among offensive tackles. Together with Garrett Bowles, they form a strong duo on the edges, yet Denver's best offensive lineman plays inside. This is my boy, Quinn Meinerz. If you don't know Quinn, look up his story on YouTube. Quinn Meinerz, somebody, just a true underdog story. I'm gonna put his his name here for you guys, because I really think you guys gotta check. Just put that in YouTube and let YouTube show you who Quinn is. I mean, this guy is going to get a massive contract soon. Part of the reason we couldn't keep Lloyd Cushenberry was because Quinn Meinerz is probably more important to the team. He's Denver's best offensive lineman. He plays inside. He finished 2023 with the third highest PFF grade among all guards. Regardless, there are questions surrounding the other two members of the interior offensive line, especially after Lloyd Cushenberry has departed. Okay. 16. Okay. This is the definition of mediocre. And from this point on, it will be getting worse and worse. The Rams will hope Jonah Jackson, who the team signed in free agency, will yield similar results, as they are expected to be once again among the better run blocking units in the NFL. The Rams had a trade accusation of Kevin Dotson ahead of the 2023 campaign, and it paid off massively. He put together a breakout season, finishing with the second highest PFF grade among guards, and earned himself a new contract with the Rams. Coming in at 17, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Moving Tristan Wirfs from right tackle to left tackle paid off for the Bucs, with Wirfs finishing as the fifth highest graded offensive tackle in the league. Luke Gadicki also impressed at his new position on the right side, ranking 27th in PFF. There are quite a few question marks along Tampa Bay's interior offensive line, where first-round pick Graham Barton is expected to start from day one. Graham Barton was a day one starter all along. At number 18, you got Miami Dolphins, and this is not really an issue because they get the ball out of their hands so quick that the defensive line rarely has an opportunity to actually bring Tua down because of his quick release. But the Dolphins' offensive line is coming in at number 18. They got off to a strong start last year. Injuries soon hit hard, hindering the unit's performance. The Dolphins lost Robert Hunt and Connor Williams from the middle of the offensive line this offseason, and Terron Armstead's durability is a question mark, preventing this group from being ranked any higher. Coming in at number 19, the Las Vegas Raiders. Oh, gross. The Raiders, there's a lot to be optimistic about with the Raiders' offensive line. Colton Miller has developed into one of the NFL's best left tackles. Center Andre James had a breakout season last year, ranked 9th among centers. And right tackle Tyler Munford Jr. was promising in his second season on a limited workload. The Raiders also selected Oregon offensive lineman Jackson Powers Johnson in the second round of the draft. So this could also be a Raiders offensive line that is trending in a really good direction. Coming in at number 20, you got the Carolina Panthers, who fielded a poor offensive line in 2023. They invested in the unit during free agency. They signed Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt to play guard. Hunt will pair up on the right side with tackle Taylor Moton, perennially underrated offensive lineman, to form one of the better right guard tackle combinations in the league. Cincinnati Bengals at 21. The Bengals double dipped at offensive tackle this offseason, signing Trent Brown in free agency after selecting Georgia's Amarius Mims during the first round. And Amarius Mims is obviously a day one starter. And I think the Bengals have been trying to get this offensive line right since Joe Burrow got here. And I think the unit finally is in good shape. The unit also needs left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. to get back to his old form. The former Chief and Raven lineman earned a career low 66.1 PFF grade. which ranked just 45th. But there's still a lot of promise. You feel good about the offensive line you got on paper. Okay. At number 22, we got the Houston Texans. We never get to see the true potential of the Texans offensive line in 2023 due to injuries, but Houston boasts one of the best left tackles in the league in Larry Tunsil. He's also a part owner of the Texans, especially when it comes to pass protection. And Shaq Mason is still a reliable veteran at right guard. However, the other players on the line are either unproven or young players who so far have not proven to be long-term solutions at the positions. But when you have a quarterback like CJ Stroud and you have Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Nico Collins, those blemishes aren't as noticeable. Staying in the AFC South, right underneath the Texans at 22, we have the Jaguars at 23. All 5 projected Jaguars starting offensive linemen were selected in either the first or second rounds of their draft. Although only the 2 offensive tackles, Cam Robinson and Anton Harrison, were picked by the Jaguars. The talent did not necessarily show on the field last season, as Jacksonville often had to rely on quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence's quick release, like we talked about Tua. The Jaguars signed center Mitch Morse in free agency, hoping he can bolster the interior offensive line. And now this was probably the most surprising one for me. At number 24, I don't know how I didn't realize that this was going on, but the 49ers at number 24. Okay. And the 49ers offensive line, of course, features arguably the best offensive lineman in the past few years in Trent Williams. And I guess in my head, that's why I was a little shocked to see them come in so low at 24. But the main reason is that those around him have failed to impress. And the rest of the offensive line consists of either career journeymen such as Drake Brendel or right guard John Feliciano, or young offensive linemen who the 49ers can hope can improve in 2024, such as Aaron Banks. But this was part of the thing. Like, you can't pay Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Kittle, Purdy, McCaffrey. You like, no wonder Denver got Mike McGlinchey from the 49ers last year. They're like, Mike McGlinchey is good, but is he good enough to be one? If you could only pay 5 guys on the team, is he in that top 5? No, he's not. Okay, well then let Denver pay him. And the results are in. The 49ers were worse off without Mike McGlinchey, but they were right. They still went to the Super Bowl because their top 5 priorities did get paid, and they are keeping the parts of the team that have to stay together staying together. But all the while, the 49ers, quietly have a mediocre offensive line. And the 49ers hope they can improve next year, but this is definitely one of probably the worst positional group on the team, right? The 49ers are star-studded everywhere else besides this one area. And the same can be said for number 25, the Baltimore Ravens. For parts of the 2023 season, the Ravens offensive line looked like a top-tier unit. However, the team lost 3 starters, Kevin Zeitler, John Thompson, and Morgan Moses. And while Tyler Lundenbaum is already one of the best centers in the NFL, Ronnie Stanley has not been the same since his injury in 2020. The rest of the offensive line will consist of either unproven young players or offensive linemen who flashed ability as backups, but have yet to prove that they can repeat those as starters. Okay. Baltimore Ravens and the 49ers, very interesting, 24 and 25. Because look, when you get down to these teams, guess what you're going to notice? All of these teams struggle to win. And that's what I was saying. Not every team with a losing record has a bad offensive line, but every team with a bad offensive line has a losing record. That's what I was trying to say earlier. There it is. Okay. So let's get into that tier of teams. Okay. We'll start with 26, Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals offensive line is without any truly weak links, but it also lacks above average players. Moving from right side to left side, Paris Johnson Jr. is expected to live up to his potential in his second season after ranking just 57th in PFF overall grade. Definitely not the kind of season that Paris Johnson was expected to have. Arizona also signed Evan Brown and Jonah Williams in free agency to further stabilize the offensive line. Coming in at 27, the Commanders. And they're going to really rely on Jaden Daniels' ability to extend the plays with his legs, because the Commanders almost completely overhauled their offensive line, slotting in 3 new starters. And the question is it going to work right away, or is he going to be running for his life? Cornelius Lucas, a backup in recent years, is taking on the starting left tackle job. Former Chiefs backup offensive lineman Nick Algoretti is expected to play left guard. And Tyler Biadazi is acquired in free agency, and he'll start at center. Sam Cosme, who ranked 4th among guards in PFF in 2023, and Andrew Weil represent the continuity on the right side of the line. Coming in at 28, you have the New England Patriots. New England can find itself further up on this list if its young guards, Cole Strange and City So, show improvement. The Patriots would rank even lower had they not re-signed Mike Onwenu, who had been arguably their best offensive line, to play right tackle, while former Pittsburgh Steeler Chiwuma Okoroafor is projected to start at left tackle, but he has just 2 career snaps there. And then coming in at 29, you have the New York Giants. The Giants' offensive line was among the NFL's worst in 2023, partly due to injuries. While they brought in a couple of new players like Jermaine Luminor and John Runyon to start at guard, they need their returners to improve drastically. Center John Michael Schmitz Jr., a second-round pick in 2023, and right tackle Evan Neal, a top 10 pick in 2022, have been disappointing so far. Even left tackle Andrew Thomas, staying healthy and getting back to his 2022 form, wouldn't make up for poor performances from the other young players on the line in 2024. And then finally, our final 3 teams, the Tennessee Titans. The Titans fielded arguably the NFL's worst offensive line last year. They can expect improvements in 2024, at least on paper, after taking Peter Skorinski with the 11th overall pick to play left guard. Tennessee selected J.C. Latham out of Alabama with the 7th overall pick this offseason. The team also signed Lloyd Cushenberry. This might be the most improved offensive line in the entire NFL. But you got to start really low to earn that, and that's where they're at right now. Number 31, the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle, man. They battled offensive line injuries all of last season, and their young offensive tackle duo didn't necessarily make any expected improvements in 2023, and there's reason to believe this year could be worse. The Seahawks moved on from starters Evan Brown and Damian Lewis, and their interior trio consists of former backups. A former first-round pick who had a couple recent disappointing seasons like Laken Tomlinson. They will desperately need offensive tackles Charles Cross and Abram Lucas to reach their potential. And last but not least, the worst offensive line in 2024 on paper, the New Orleans Saints. Okay. Now, speaking of on paper, the Saints offensive line features 4 former first-round picks. But just like the Jaguars, it doesn't matter where you're picked. Their performance says otherwise. Right tackle Ryan Rosmiak will likely need to miss the entire season, which will force New Orleans to play Trevor Penning at that spot after benching him last year. Right guard Cesar Ruiz failed to rank among the top 50 guards in PFF overall grade in any of his first 4 seasons. As a result, the Saints have to hope that Oregon State product Talesifuga will hit the ground running at left tackle to improve the unit. But this could be one of the main things that holds back the Saints, Derek Carr, and I just think this whole thing is getting really close to being blown up. I think Chris Olave is a piece you can keep, but Alvin Kamara, the head Dennis Allen, Derek Carr, I think it's all going to be gone after this season. Having the worst offensive line in the NFL is not going to get you a surprise success. You can have your teams that come out and surprise you. Like, well, we didn't think they were going to be a 10-win team or a 9-win team. It's not going to happen if you have the worst offensive line or even the second or third worst offensive line in the NFL. It's just too important. And if you don't realize how important it is, talk to somebody that doesn't have one. They will remind you it is impossible to win on Sundays without an offensive line. So just recapping, we got the Lions, Eagles, Colts, Browns, and Jets in the top 5. Then from 6 to 10, we got Falcons, Chiefs, Bills, Steelers, Cowboys. From 11 to 15, Bears, Chargers, Vikings, Packers, Broncos. From 16 to 20, we got Rams, Bucks, Dolphins, Raiders, and Panthers. From 21 to 25, Bengals, Texans, Jags, 49ers, Ravens. And 26 to 32, Cardinals, Commanders, Patriots, Giants, Titans, Seahawks, Saints. Those are the 2024 NFL offensive line rankings. Lions take the top spot, led by Penei Sewell and Frank Ragnow. But there were plenty of good offensive lines. But the top 5 teams, like I said, the Lions, playoffs, Eagles, playoffs, Browns, playoffs, Jets, playoffs, Colts, Falcons, we'll see. Chiefs, playoffs, Bills, playoffs, Steelers, probably playoffs, Cowboys, playoffs. I mean, 8 of the top 10 offensive lines are going to be in the playoffs, if not 10 out of 10. So that's how important it is. And then if you look at the bottom 10, which teams in the bottom are going to be in the playoffs? Giants, Titans, Seahawks, Saints, Commanders, Patriots, Cardinals. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. You wouldn't predict any of those to be playoff teams. So just don't forget how important it is to have that offensive line secured. And Bill said, because you've got both, they can't double team either. So, offensive line, just put the Giants at 32 already. And then Bill said, so we aren't the worst. Who knew? No, Bill, you are not the worst. Matter of fact, you guys are trending in the right direction. You guys are going to surprise a lot of teams, and you're going to make a postseason push. You're probably going to win a playoff game, and Daniel Jones will cement himself as a top 10 quarterback in the league, and Tommy DeVito will get traded for 3 first-round picks because he is going to be too valuable to be a backup. And you're going to end up seeing Tommy DeVito traded to the Broncos, and then you're going to be a half Broncos fan for Tommy DeVito, and the Broncos and Giants will end up playing in the Super Bowl. Daniel Jones versus Tommy DeVito in the Super Bowl. It's going to be a crazy time to be alive. But hopefully you guys like when I get into the PFF stuff. I know some people might not find it as fun, but it is fun to try to grab an understanding. All these teams, man, so much restructuring happens between February and July, and it's good to feel like I got a grip on where these offensive lines are at, especially knowing how important that unit is. We're going to be doing these in the next couple days. We're going to be moving from the position of offensive line strengths. We're going to look at single player position rankings. So for instance, quarterback, you're going to have Mahomes at number 1 and then so on. But we're going to be doing this for every position. So if you guys enjoy this, definitely tune in. I'm going to be doing probably tomorrow. I'll be doing all the other, let's see, I'll do quarterbacks tomorrow. quarterback, wide receivers, and running backs tomorrow. But we're going to start ranking all of these positional groups and some of the single positions as well, single player positions like quarterback. So definitely tune into that. We got KC in the chat. What's up, KC? He said, I predict Reed and Spags stay with the Chiefs. And then Bill said, yeah, Spags isn't going anywhere. He's good where he's at. I wish we still had him and he didn't leave to try and head coach the Rams. It didn't work well for him. Yeah, Spags is, look, right now, everybody in Kansas City is like riding this train. And you look at, the history that's right outside the fingertips right now. 3 Super Bowls in a row. No one's ever done it. You know how important a Super Bowl is to these teams. I mean, there's a reason Ben Johnson said that he stayed in Detroit, and he sarcastically said, I like the weather. Obviously, he's joking. He wants to win a Super Bowl, and the Lions feel like they're in really good position to do it this year. But same thing with the coaching staff for the Chiefs. Like, you got a chance to make history, for your name to live forever among the best dynasty of all time. You're staying put for sure. So those are the top offensive lines in the league. You guys can follow me at NFL with Kyle, and you can be alert for more of these rankings to come out tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to do single player positional rankings, and then we're going to do other unit rankings like wide receiver, running back, defensive line, and linebackers. And I'll give you a hint on the defensive line. Bill's going to really be excited to do the defensive line position because maybe he's not going to be that excited about it, actually. No, he might actually hate it. No. But yeah, I'm excited about this PFF using a bunch of different analytics to put together these numbers, including the PFF grades from last year. So I think it's pretty accurate, and it'll give us a pretty good idea. We are in July, which is our last month of no football. This is it. All we got to do is get through July. In August, there's football. September, football. October, football. It's all coming back, but you can get all caught up to speed so you know what's going on before preseason kicks off here at NFL with Kyle. Please like the video. Helps the algorithm. Want to say a big thank you to everybody that has been watching this channel. We just hit 50 subscribers. I got a notification on YouTube with fireworks that were going off in the background. And honestly, it's a pretty big milestone for me trying to, build my personal page outside of the Only Football. It's hard when you have the Only Football podcast and it has 650 subscribers and you're going to go solo. It's hard to not go live on the Only Football podcast because there's a bigger audience and there's more people watching, and you just feel like your time isn't being spent in vain. It's hard to just trust the process. Go live. It doesn't matter if you have 1 subscriber, just do it. You're never going to get, 100 subscribers if you only go live on a different platform every time. So just kind of trusting that process and seeing the results of 50 subscribers makes me really happy, and couldn't do it without you guys, because at least I know, hey, if I go live, Casey will be there, Bill will be there, Ginger will be there. So just wanted to say a shout out to you guys. And Bill says congratulations on 50, and appreciate all of you. So I hope you guys have a good 4th of July. Remember, safe firework practices. No Giants players are permitted to play with fireworks tomorrow. The hot dog eating contest will be on. We'll talk about that. And of course, just enjoy living in America. I mean, that's what tomorrow is about, right? Independence Day. It's America's birthday. It's a really, really amazing place to live. I think most people that don't realize that just haven't traveled enough. But it is a beautiful thing to live in this country. I am a proud American. I love my country, and I love the people that live in it. And I'm going to celebrate that tomorrow. I don't really do fireworks or anything like that, but I'm definitely going to be celebrating my independence, probably laying out by the pool, getting some sun, eating some hot dogs, and doing a little bit of writing for the podcast later that day. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Bill said, LOL, Kyle knows the JPP lore. I do. But on that note, I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Happy 4th. See ya.